Hi everyone, and welcome back to Let's Get Technical. Today we are going to look at Adobe Photoshop. This is part 2 of Adobe Photoshop, and you can find part 1 on the Meaford Public Library's Facebook and YouTube page. We have access to Adobe Photoshop and all the other apps included in Adobe Creative Cloud due to the generous donation by the Rotary Club of Meaford. Last week we left off here. You may notice this picture looks slightly different, and that's simply because I made a mistake between sessions, so I had to redo it. But you can just follow the tutorial to get something similar. It might look just slightly different, and that may be because I used a different shade of purple and green in the background, but otherwise the image is completely the same. At the end of last week, we had removed the stock image background, and by doing so, it had created this mask layer. We can actually adjust this mask layer to change its density, which is its transparency of the area it's masking, as well as add a feather effect to blur the edges between the areas that have been removed and the areas that remain, if we wanted. Once we have finished making adjustments, we can right-click on the mask and select Apply Layer Mask. Now we can see it has combined, and when we look at that little image in the bottom right, we can see that the background has been removed from the stock image. Once we have combined it, we can no longer make adjustments, so be careful because you cannot get the background back after you have applied the mask. Now say I want to make sure the image is centered. I can click Show Transform Controls at the top. Now it has this rectangle which I can use to make the image bigger or smaller. Then if I click off and back on again, I can now hit this ellipsis to open a menu. Alignment is grayed out, and that's simply because we need to align it to the entire canvas. Now we can center it and place it at the bottom. The next thing we are going to look at is the text tool, located here. You can click on it, and it's like any other text tools you usually see. You simply type what you want to write, wherever you want to write on the canvas, and now you can double click on it to change the font style at the top. You can change the weight of it, the size of it, as well as the crispness of the edges. You can also change the color here. And we can change the effect. We can make it arc, or give it a bulge, or put it in the shape of a fish. We can also adjust the settings down below. There's a lot of customization available to create the effect that you want. Now we'll just delete that text. So to delete, I click on the layer and then I hit the trash can icon on the bottom right. Now when you right-click on the text tool, there are other text options. There's also a vertical text as well as these mask tools, which we're going to look at next. To show that, I'm going to start by creating another layer. We're going to draw a rectangle with the marquee tool, and now I'm going to fill this rectangle. You can either use the paint bucket or the gradient tool, and in this case I'm going to use the gradient tool just to show off that feature. I'll click on the box on the top right here and change that color to blue. Then I want the second color to be purple. You can now see it's blue and purple, and up here it is also blue and purple. So now when I click and drag, it creates this blue and purple gradient. And there's different types of gradients that you can create listed here. If you click on the color, it actually opens a menu where you can also choose a gradient preset from these folders. So let's choose this gradient preset. Now when we click and drag, it uses that gradient color. To deselect everything, we're going to simply hit Ctrl and D on the keyboard. Next, we're going to right-click on the text tool and select Vertical Type Mask Tool, so you can also see what vertical text looks like. Now I'm just going to type in the word book. We can see it fits in the square, which is what we want, so we don't need to make any adjustments. When we're done, we can just hit the check mark. Now, if I click and drag, you can see it has cut out the text from this gradient box. I'll just make the bottom layers invisible by clicking the eye icons next to them to get a better look. You can see it has cut out that text background, in this case the gradient, and moved it there. This is really useful if you want to cut out text from a background, say a photo, to give it a nice effect. The rectangle tool is the next thing we're going to look at. Before, we were using the marquee tool to draw a rectangle and then the paint bucket tool to fill that rectangle. this rectangle tool actually does both of those steps in one. So if I click and draw, it creates a rectangle, and then I can simply click on the right here where it says fill to change the color of it. The color wheel is located here. You can also see there are preset colors for you to choose from. There are also these different patterns you can choose from, so you could even add trees, or grass, or water. You can also add a border around it by adjusting the stroke color. So let's make it pink. We can also change that border to be dashed or dotted, as well as the positioning of the border dashes and the dash spacing. Now we don't need this layer, so we'll just delete it as well. If we right-click on the rectangle tool, there are also a variety of more shapes to choose from, including this custom shape tool. Now let's just adjust the fill color for it at the top. Now we can actually see here it has an interesting shape. When I click and drag on the canvas, we can actually see the shape is a tree. Now when I click off the tool, we can see it has drawn a shape of a tree in the color we chose for us. There's a variety of different things you can draw, such as boats or flowers if you want. Now that's just a neat tool to allow you to get the shapes that you want for your graphics. Now we're going to delete both of these layers, so to do that we can hit Control and select both layers, then hit the trash can icon. This will delete both of the layers at the same time. Next, I want to add some texture to the image, and to do that we're going to use a stock image. Normally we open Adobe Stock from the Creative Cloud desktop. However, another way to access them is simply to select File, then search Adobe Stock. The Meaford Public Library has access to 750 Adobe Stock assets a month, which you have access to when you use Adobe Stock at the library. Now we're going to search for a nice texture for our image. We can scroll until we find something we like. I've already tried out this image while practicing, and I really liked it. If we look below, we can see there are even more options of a similar style listed here. Let's give this pastel one a try. To license it, I simply hit the blue license button, and then it will automatically download to the computer. So now we can go back to Photoshop. Then we can open the file from our File Explorer, and it's going to be in Downloads. Now we can just click and drag it to add as a layer in the project. Before I continue on, I'm going to convert the stock image to a smart layer by scrolling to the bottom of the properties on the right. This allows us to make more changes and transformations without losing original image data. We'll just resize it to make it fit the canvas and then move it so it's below the stock image of the woman reading, but above our purple and green background. If we click this button where it says normal, we can change the blending mode. This allows us to add different effects to the layer, while also adding some transparency so we can see the bottom layers. I like this soft light effect, so I'm just going to choose that one. Now if I drag the layer to the top of the images, we can see it's adding a transparent effect on the pastel stock image. So we can see the other layers, but we can also have the texture of that stock pastel image. The next thing we're going to look at is filters. Filters are located at the top, and if you click on it, you can see a variety of options. You can blur things out, distort them, add noise, pixelate, render things, sharpen, stylize, video, and more. We're going to look at stylize. Say you wanted to add oil paint and make it look like an oil painting, you could. To see the change, you actually have to hit preview, and now you can see it has added an effect to make it look kind of like an oil painting. There are a variety of adjustments you can make to the filter to get the details you want. In the Stylize tab, there are more options for you to explore. Next, we're going to look at wind, say if you wanted to make your image look like it was windy. You can see the preview of it here and make adjustments in this window before you apply it to the image. Next, we'll look at the Render tab. So I'm going to add a layer. And now if we go to Filter, then Render, we can actually render a tree. This is neat because there's a variety of different trees for you to choose from. It allows you to create your own custom tree. There's also different properties you can change about the tree. We can change where the light direction is coming from, the amount of leaves it has to make it look like it has a lot or barely any. We can adjust the leaf size so we can barely see them or make them the maximum size. We can also change the branch height to make it look like a Lorax tree if we wanted. We can also change the thickness of the branches. If we reduce it, we can see now it looks like a twig, or we can make it thicker. We can also adjust the leaf type. Right now it is default, but we can actually choose the type of leaves we want. So even though it's a pine tree, we can actually give it maple leaves if we desired. These tools just allow a lot of customization to create your own original tree. You can also change the arrangement to change the shape of the tree. In the Advanced tab, we can also change the color of the leaves to a custom color. Let's make the tree purple. We can also adjust the shading and contrast with these buttons. When we're satisfied with our customization, we can hit OK to create the tree. And now we can see it added our own purple tree. Let's just make the background layers invisible so we can see it better. To do that, once again, we simply hit the eye icons on those layers. Now we can get a good view of our purple tree. This render tool just allows you to create realistic 3D looking graphics. Now we're going to try to add a flame. First we go to Filter, then Render, then Flame. We're getting an error saying we need to add a selected path to use this filter. So that actually means we need to use the pen tool, which I talked a bit about in the last video. Using this tool, we can simply draw the path we want the flame to take. When we've done that, we can select Filter, then Render, and then Flame. Now we can see it's created a flame that is following the path. We can change how many flames we want, or if we want it to be candlelight, as well as make it a custom color. We can hit OK when we're done customizing. And there we go, we now have a flame. We can right-click and then select Delete to delete the path, and using the Move tool, we can now move the flame around. Now I'm just going to delete the layer with the flame. I click the blank box next to the layer to make that layer visible again. Now say I don't want to be able to move my layers around, I can just hit this lock icon to lock the layer in place. I'll just do that with the other layers, so now nothing can be moved when I click and drag on the canvas. We can also look at how to replace color. To do that, we right-click on the brush tool and select the color replacement tool. It's similar to the removing the background tool, which we used in the last session, and you can have continuous sampling or only sample once. Let's change the color we want to replace it as to purple. Now if I click on the image, I get an error, and that's because this layer is locked, and you can't make adjustments to a layer when it is locked. So to unlock it, we simply click on the layer, then the lock icon. We can then make the brush bigger by using the square brackets on our keyboard. Now, when I click and drag, we can see it's replacing the color of the book with purple. However, as we draw from the book to the sweater, we can see it's replacing both with purple. This is because it's continually sampling. Continuous sampling means it's constantly taking in the color underneath the crosshairs and thinking it needs to replace that color. So as I get closer to the sweater, if I accidentally hit over top the yellow, it's thinking it needs to replace that yellow color. So if we change the sampling to once and then click on the book, it's sampling the color orange. Now, when I continue to draw over the sweater, it doesn't change the color. It's only taken that orange sample and it doesn't take any more. And there we go, we can see it's changed the book to a purple color. So this tool is really useful for when you want to swap the colors of things. Now I'm just going to undo these color replacements by hitting Ctrl Z until we're back to the original book color. We have a couple more effects we're going to look at. These are lighting effects, which could be found under the filter menu we used earlier. We can see that the options are grayed out, and that's because when I was undoing the color replacement effect, I accidentally relocked the layer. Now that it's unlocked, we can go to Filter, then Render, then Lighting Effects. We can add a lighting effect to make it look like the picture has a light source. Now it's only adding the effect to the top layer as that's the only one I clicked on. You can see here it's adjusting to make it seem like there's light coming from the top left. It's adding shadows and highlights based off where that light source is. You can also click and move it around to customize the shape of the lighting effects as desired, as well as where that light source is coming from. I can deselect Preview by clicking this box to see the original image. So that's it without the effect, and that's it with. Now I'm just going to cancel because I don't need that effect. Another thing we can do is add adjustments to each layer. So I can click on a layer. Now I can select adjustments on the right here. In this adjustment tab, I can then select hue and saturation. Here I can change the hue of that layer to change the overall color. So I'll click on this little arrow on the hue bar, and then when I click and drag it to move it around, we can see it's adjusting the colors of that layer. We'll make it more of a blue and yellow hue so it matches her sweater a bit better. Now you can see here it's actually added this hue adjustment as another layer. So if I click and drag it to move it to the top, we can see it's changing the hue of the entire image. This hue adjustment layer is affecting all the hues of the layers below it. When we're completely done with the image adjustments and want to combine the layers, we can right-click it and hit Merge Visible. Now instead of all those layers, we simply have one. The last thing we're going to look at is Filter, Render, then Lens Flare. We can adjust the brightness and location of the flare. And when we hit OK, it adds a lens flare to the entire image. I think we're done, so now we can simply hit File, Save As, and then Save on your computer. Let's save it as a PNG, then hit OK. Now we're going to find where it's saved in our documents and open it. And ta-da! Here's our completed image. Quite a change from the blank canvas we initially started with. And that's some Photoshop basics. There are so many more things available in Photoshop that I have not covered. It may seem a bit overwhelming, but please remember there are many more tutorials available for you to follow both on YouTube and on the app itself. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you have a great week.